Welcome, freaks and fiends, to another review show. This week, we are going deep into the terrifying world of children's entertainment. You laugh, but this has always been a big fear of mine. This week, we take a look at Monkey's Magic Merry-Go-Round. So hit the lights and let's get the projector rolling. Monkey's Magic Merry-Go-Round. A children's TV show host ensnared in a case of amnesia must confront his missing memories as his puppet co-stars turn on him. Directed by Aidan Leary, written by Leary and C.R. Thompson, and starring Michael Gillo, Frank Cesario, and Connor Brown Spregner. There is a very specific, deeply unsettling flavour of dread that comes from taking the bright, primary coloured artefacts of our childhood and twisting them into something malicious. We've seen the corrupted innocence trope play out before with possessed dolls, haunted arcades, and murderous animatronics. But there is a massive difference between cheap plastic jump scares and genuine, lingering terror. That is precisely where Aidan Leary's Monkey's Magic Merry-Go-Round steps in and completely elevates the subgenre. Leary doesn't just throw a creepy mask on a childhood mascot and call it a day. He engineers a claustrophobic, atmosphere-heavy nightmare that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. It's a masterclass in slow burn tension, proving that when handled by a director who actually understands pacing and psychological horror, the most innocent iconography can become absolute high-octane nightmare fuel. To really understand why a film like Monkey's Magic Merry-Go-Round is so brutally effective, we have to look at the actual psychological mechanics of fear. In his 1919 essay, The Uncanny, Sigmund Freud argued that the most terrifying things aren't the completely alien or unknown, but rather things that are deeply familiar to us, yet somehow slightly off or altered. Leary weaponizes this concept of the uncanny valley from the opening frame. The aesthetic of the merry-go-round and its titular monkey isn't inherently monstrous at first glance. It's aggressively nostalgic, which is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Furthermore, the film taps heavily into the cultural theory of hauntology, a concept popularized by philosopher Mark Fisher. Fisher wrote about the cultural obsession with the ghosts of lost futures and the eerie, degraded media of the past. Leary's film feels like a haunted artifact, a cursed VHS tape, or a forgotten broadcast that you were never supposed to unearth. It uses the decayed analog texture of forgotten children's entertainment to create an atmosphere of profound isolation and wrongness. What sets this film apart from the endless sea of indie horror cash-ins is its absolute commitment to practical effects and sound design. We talk a lot on this show about how CGI usually kills the tension because it lacks physical weight, but Leary anchors his horror in reality. The mechanical grinding of the merry-go-round gears, the stiff, uncanny movements, and the squelchy, visceral reality of the practical gore when the violence finally erupts all combine to create a deeply tactile viewing experience. The sound design alone deserves its own deep dive. Instead of relying on deafening orchestral strings to tell you when to be scared, the film uses negative space, ambient drone, and the warped, distorted echoes of carnival music to build a suffocating sense of dread. By the time the third act kicks in and the true nature of the horror is fully unleashed, you are already completely worn down by the oppressive, heavy atmosphere. Leary also deserves massive credit for his framing and cinematography. Much like the best cult classics of the genre, he understands that what you don't see is almost always more terrifying than what you do. He forces the audience to stare into the dark corners of the frame, letting the tension stretch until it's nearly unbearable unbearable before delivering the payoff. It's an incredibly confident piece of filmmaking that respects its audience enough not to hold their hands. Instead of over-explaining the lore or spelling out the origins of the curse with a heavy-handed exposition dump, the film feeds you just enough breadcrumbs to keep you completely hooked, allowing your own imagination to fill in the darkest gaps. But beneath the visceral scares and the uncanny aesthetics, the true genius of this film lies in its thematic core, the impossible task of processing profound trauma. Monkey's Magic Merry-Go-Round is ultimately a story about how we try to cope with the darkest events of our lives. It violently illustrates the fact that no matter how hard you try, you simply cannot paint over a stained, agonizing memory with bright, innocent imagery and expect your troubles to disappear. The film understands that unprocessed trauma doesn't just fade away, it actively follows you, infecting your safe spaces and mutating that very same innocent imagery into a grotesque reflection of the exact thing you were trying to hide from in the first place. The titular monkey and its ride aren't just a cursed attraction, they are the manifestation of a mind trying to bury its pain under childhood nostalgia, only to watch that nostalgia rot from the inside out. Ultimately, Monkey's Magic Merry-Go-Round is a massive triumph of indie horror and a shining example of what happens when a creative team prioritizes atmosphere, subtext, and genuine craftsmanship over cheap gimmicks. It takes a familiar, almost comforting piece of childhood nostalgia and violently rips the stuffing out of it, leaving behind something totally hypnotic and terrifying. It's that exact kind of dark, intelligent, boundary-pushing cinema that we absolutely live for on this network anyway. And it demands to be watched in a pitch-black room with the volume turned all the way up. This one easily earns its place as a modern cult favorite. This is a 4-volt charge, which equates to just how many shots of whiskey I needed to sleep nightmare-free after watching it. Watch it now on Screenbox. If you like that, then check out our Patreon with subs, only $5 a month with a 7-day free trial. That's at the Horrorverse Network, only on Patreon.